With medieval philosophy covered, it's time to examine the next big paradigm shift in philosophy. The 15th century Renaissance marked the end of the medieval era and signaled a revival of ancient Greek knowledge and values. Copernicus revolutionized astronomy by removing Earth from the center of the universe to propose a heliocentric and more mathematically accurate model, thereby greatly influencing the scientific revolution to come. Likewise, the divine was taken out of the center of discussion in philosophy and the sciences to shift the focus onto human beings in a natural world. Though by no means atheistic, as many authors would emphasize their faith in some way, this period diverted to a secular discussion in a naturalistic perspective. In philosophy, this shift was characterized by two main schools of thought: the rationalists, focusing on reason itself and its faculties above the senses and experience, and the empiricists, who, though not discarding reason entirely, focused on experience and that which is attained by the senses, above a strong conception of rationality. This contrast was similar to the already age-old distinction between Platonic and Aristotelian conceptions of the world. Both schools were followed by the idealists, who tried to resolve this duality in different manners. We'll begin with the rationalists here, then move on to the empiricists, and then follow up with the idealists. Finally, we'll talk about political philosophers and then conclude this section on modern philosophy by catching up on the logical developments in this period, before then advancing to contemporary philosophy in the early 20th century. Interestingly, the first philosopher we will talk about does not fit any of these labels. Michel de Montaigne was a curious figure in the 16th century who created the essay format as we know it today in literature, also reviving Pyrrhonism in modern philosophy, and being one of the first examples of the limitless manner of philosophical investigation that the modern times allowed. He wrote an abundance of texts, all guided only by a frank desire to understand human nature, education, and the world through his own reason. They were so forthright that he frequently changes positions on multiple topics throughout his life, and thus he always remarked that as his own senses and memory are faulty, so are everyone's. Therefore, no human being could ever achieve true knowledge of anything. His essays were deeply affected by the expeditions to America being made at the time. Reports were given from voyagers regarding a new world, not only in a physical sense, but also cultural, given the description of costumes and worldviews from natives. These shaped Montaigne's views on culture and tolerance, and he refused to accept an ethnocentric approach in which European culture was by any means superior from those that could be found in the New World. He also wrote extensively against authority and organized religion, as he judged the religious quarrels of his time beyond any resemblance of divinity, and thoroughly criticized education of his time, which focused on supposed absolute knowledge of the teacher. This prevented curiosity and questioning, and thus learning itself. Additionally, there was the frequent use of abstract concepts distant from students' everyday lives and experiences. Although his ideas were not very relevant to future philosophy, being so varied and inconsistent, his new method of writing and pedagogical insights are clearly very relevant to this day. One of the first and most famous proper rationalists was René Descartes, a prominent French philosopher and mathematician who created the Cartesian coordinate system we are familiar with from algebra. Descartes wrote meditations regarding existence and reason, toward finding the best method to discover the most fundamental truths on which all systems of knowledge could rely upon. Mathematics, philosophy, ethics, and everything else were all intertwined for him, symbolizing different aspects of the same reality, creating a metaphor for a tree where mathematics, ethics, medicine, and other subjects would be its branches. Physics would be its trunk, and metaphysics or ontology its roots. Akin to Plato, only through reason could we be able to understand all the parts of the tree and discover its metaphysical, unchanging truths, supporting everything else. For our reason allows us to question everything in order to investigate the roles and connections between different objects and concepts. To arrive at the ultimate truths, Descartes wondered about dreams and how we tend to believe everything within a dream is real right until we wake up. Couldn't we then possibly be inside a dream without knowing it? After all, bodily senses can frequently be mistaken, as when your hand is cold and the water in a bowl seems hot when it's just room temperature, or when you mishear someone in a game of telephone. Thus, they cannot be fully trusted. He exaggerates this as he posits a fictitious evil genius who is bent on fooling us at every turn, and thus everything that can be questioned can statistically be false, and as such cannot be a foundational truth to base all valid knowledge. But what is the only thing that cannot be false? That would be the only thing allowing for our capacity for questioning itself, as if it were false, we would not be able to question anything. That one exists is the only thing a rational entity can be sure of without any doubt. Reason, then, is the first ultimate foundational truth, and from this realization he coined his famous phrase, "I think, therefore I am." I am being used in the sense of I exist. But if such absolute unquestionable truth exists, then the Christian God is also true, for no evil genius would grant us the capability of realizing their work is false. This is an ontological argument, similar to that of Anselm, in that the existence of the Christian God is asserted, given an abstract logical necessity. From these basic truths, according to Descartes, one is able to identify all the true laws governing nature. Some argue that the addition of the ontological argument, and therefore the mention of God in his argument, was there only to avoid censorship from the Catholic Church, given that the argument can work even without God, but this is highly debatable. So, however far Descartes veered from theology, the divine is still strong in his work as a foundational element. He then went on to defend a dualist metaphysics, in that we have the sphere of things of the mind, res cogitans, and the realm of bodily experience, res extensa, two coexisting but essentially different substances. But only humans, as his God's creations, would be endowed with reason, other animals being nothing but automatons living their life mechanically toward survival, unaware of the logical threads governing existence. Though Aristotle and others established general guidelines for scientific endeavors, the method Descartes developed as a manner of inquiry toward these fundamental truths is one of the first official formulations of what would become the current scientific method. The 4 steps may be summed up as follows. 1. Question everything which is not self-evident. 2. Divide everything into the smallest, simplest parts possible. 3. Solve problems going from simplest to most complex. And 4. Re-examine the reasoning. Directly inspired by Descartes, the Dutch philosopher Baruch Spinoza was a similar rationalist in the 17th century with a religious agenda in his Judaism, an aspect permeating most of his theory. Instead of stating that there are 2 distinct substances composing existence, like Descartes, he proposed that everything was a manifestation of the same substance, a divine substance he associated with the Jewish God. It can be known without reference to anything outside of it, as we, our mind, nature, and divinity, would merely be different aspects of the same substance. Concepts of free will or probability would be meaningless, as everything happens necessarily as the divine will directs. Good and evil also do not exist, and all we see are imperfections due to our limited capacities as mere humans. His work was viewed as blasphemous from the perspective of Judaism, and he was excommunicated from the religion, an act which remains in place to this day. Another rationalist was Blaise Pascal, an important mathematician and also a physicist and writer in the 17th century, who, much like Galileo Galilei, never wrote anything specifically on philosophy. However, from his writings, we can observe that he had a very similar dualist position as his fellow countryman Descartes, though he denied both rationalism and empiricism to focus on fideism, the idea that faith is more important than reason to acquire knowledge. As his position suggests, he also thought theology and philosophy of religion were of much greater importance than any other area of knowledge. His writings were not of great relevance except for a few concepts in philosophy of mathematics and the well-known Pascal's wager, an argument for the belief in the Christian God relying on statistics, which we will briefly analyze in another tutorial. Finally, one of the last rationalists was the German Gottfried Leibniz. A noteworthy scholar, he developed important material on several areas of philosophy, but also in physics, mathematics, jurisprudence, geology, and history, besides several inventions. Akin to his fellow rationalists and even the atomists millennia before him, Leibniz envisioned that the fabric of existence was composed of several monads, atom-like individual, indivisible, and immaterial substances which act in harmony with each other in a soul-like manner, according to their purpose or perception, designated by the Christian God. Each of them are unique and eternal, and different kinds of monads would be present in different contexts, and their relations could be understood with proper logical analysis and obeying a set of principles which he frequently posited. These were the previously mentioned principle of sufficient reason, and a few others like Aristotle's non-contradiction principle, in which a statement cannot be true and false at the same time. This strong metaphysical conception of the world was a direct development of Descartes while attempting to bridge the mind-body divide, a proto-idealistic perspective, however still regarding the physical world as mere appearances from different settings of monads. In the realm of ethics, he tried to argue about the problem of the existence of evil in the world, appealing to the fact that if God exists, and if he is good, the existence of evil can only be explained if this world is the best of possible worlds. This is a relatively flawed argument, also known as Leibnizian optimism, motivated by his religious belief. At any rate, today there is an entire field of logic that studies the realm of possibilities based on this analogy with possible worlds, called modal logic. Rationalist philosophy greatly influenced the posterior idealist thinkers, as both their naming and ideas are clearly more inclined toward rationalism than to empiricism, even though they claim to conceive of a balance of the two. In the next tutorial, we'll take a look at these empiricists to understand how they viewed the world in an almost completely different fashion than the rationalists.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel for more tutorials. Support me on Patreon so I can keep making content. And as always, feel free to email me, ProfessorDaveExplains@gmail.com.